During dinner, my husband spilled hot soup on me when I refused to give my bank card to his mother and said, "Either you give her the card today or pack your stuff and leave." So I left. But when he came the next morning with his mother, he was stunned by what he saw. "Hello, my name is Nancy and I am 28 years old. Before we begin, tell us what country you're watching from, whether you've subscribed to the channel, and if you've liked the video. We hope you enjoy the story." The soup burned instantly. I didn't even have time to understand what happened. I just felt the hot liquid run down my chest, soaking into my blouse and scalding my skin. Reflexively, I jumped up, trying to shake off the drops of borscht. His words were still ringing in my ears. "Either you give her the card today or pack your stuff and get out." Victor stood over me, large, heavy, with a face red from rage. In his eyes, I saw something that made a chill run down my spine. After 23 years of marriage, I was genuinely afraid of my husband for the first time. "Vitya, what are you doing?" I managed to whisper, holding a soaked napkin to my chest. "What are you doing?" he mocked me. "My mom asks for help, and you're making a fuss?" His mother, Ludmila Petrovna, sat across the table with her thin lips pressed together. Her cold gaze slid over me, and I could swear I saw a satisfied smirk at the corner of her mouth. "Lenotchka," she said in that sweet syrupy voice I hated with every fiber of my being, "is it really so hard to help an old woman? Her pension's not enough. You know how expensive everything is these days. Especially medicine." I silently left the table and went to the bathroom, locking the door, something I had never done before. I took off my blouse and held my red skin under cool water. In the mirror I saw my face, lost with frozen tears in my eyes. What am I doing? How did I end up like this? I asked my reflection. Victor and I met back in '91, when everything was falling apart around us, but we were young and believed we could face anything together. He worked at a factory. I had just graduated with a degree in literature and dreamed of becoming a writer. I remember how he admired my stories, said I had talent. When did that all change? When did I stop being his beloved wife and become a voiceless ATM for his mother? When did I learn to stay quiet, to adapt, to fear his displeasure? Heavy footsteps approached the door. "Lena, stop the theatrics." Victor's muffled voice came through. "Come out. Let's talk like adults." Like adults. I chuckled bitterly. When a husband pours soup on you, then offers to talk like adults, that's no marriage, it's a farce. I remembered a conversation I had yesterday with Natasha, my university friend. We hadn't seen each other in nearly 2 years. Victor thought she was a bad influence on me, and, as always, I gave in. Natasha had called out of the blue after somehow finding my new number. "Are you okay?" she asked after a few minutes. "Of course," I replied automatically. "Come on, Lenka. I've known you since freshman year. What's going on?" And suddenly I burst into tears. For the first time in years I let it all out. How Victor controlled all our money. How he constantly humiliated me in front of others. How I was scared to even speak, afraid to trigger his anger. "Remember how we used to dream of writing books?" Natasha said. "I wrote 2 detective novellas and self-published them. And you? Have you written even a line in all these years?" I was silent, and my silence said more than any words could. "You know, I ended up alone," she continued. "Coca left me for a younger woman. We split the apartment. I thought life was over. But now I finally started living. Without fear. By my own rules." Someone knocked again, harder this time. "Lena, your tantrum impresses no one. Come out. Now." I looked at my ruined blouse, stained with brown borscht. It looked just like my life, stained and spoiled. And suddenly, I felt an extraordinary clarity in my mind. Either you give her the card or pack your stuff and get out. Fine, Vitya, you gave me a choice. For the first time in years, I was going to make a decision for myself. I opened the door and calmly walked past my husband without saying a word. He looked after me, clearly stunned by my reaction. Where are you going? To pack my stuff, I replied. Victor laughed. More of your cheap drama, Lena. Come on, enough. Make the tea. But I was already reaching up into the cabinet to pull down an old suitcase, the same one I had once taken to Moscow when I enrolled in university. It was worn, faded, just like my life with this man. For 23 years, I told myself that you had to endure things for the sake of family, that everyone had their struggles, that if he hits you, it means he loves you, like my own mother used to say. For 23 years, I smothered my desires, my dreams, my ambitions. I betrayed myself, for a man who just poured hot borscht on me over a bank card. That was the final straw. And it came in the form of soup. I was packing and my hands were trembling. Not from fear, no. From a strange, unfamiliar feeling. One that was part despair and part liberation. The bedroom was quiet. Only the old clock, my grandmother's, ticked away the final minutes of my former life. 23 years in this house. And what could I even call mine? Victor stood in the doorway, leaning on the frame. His massive figure filled almost the entire space. Back when I was a student, I used to admire his broad shoulders, the strong arms of a factory mechanic. Reliable, my friends said. Like a rock. Be a wall, my mother used to say confidently. Are you serious? There was no concern in his voice, only irritation. You're really ready to start a scandal over this nonsense in the middle of the night? I silently pulled blouses, skirts, and dresses out of the closet. How few good clothes I actually had. Most of them were modest, plain. When did I stop dressing up? When did I start cutting back on myself, yet obediently handing over money for another TV for Lyudmila Petrovna? Mom is right, Victor continued, seeing I didn't respond. You've started thinking too highly of yourself. Forgot who pulled you out of your village, who gave you a roof over your head. And now, look at her. The princess is offended. I froze, clutching my only dressy outfit in my hands, a dark blue dress with a collar, bought for Victor's 40th birthday 5 years ago. I carefully smoothed out an invisible wrinkle. Pulled me out of the village. I repeated quietly. We met in the university library. I was in my 3rd year. You were working and studying in the evenings. I lived in a dorm, not a village. And when we got married, we lived for the first 3 years in a room I got from the school where I worked. Here we go, he rolled his eyes theatrically. Again, you with your lectures. Always sorting everything out, proving your point. Behind him appeared Lyudmila Petrovna. Her thin face was frozen in righteous indignation. Vitka, don't lower yourself, please. If your wife values her bank card more than family, let her go. Give her a flag and a drum, let her march away. You'll find yourself a proper, practical woman without all these endless complaints. She talked about me in the 3rd person, as if I wasn't even in the room. Had always been this way. In 23 years I had never become a real person to her, only a function, daughter-in-law, housekeeper, money source. Lyudmila Petrovna, I turned to her while continuing to neatly fold my clothes. You know, I never refused to help you. Vitya and I bought you furniture, appliances, medicine. I personally took you to the sanatorium last summer, using my own vacation time. So now I'm supposed to bow at your feet for that till I die, his mother scoffed. Wasn't a big favor. You're the wife of her son. It's your duty to help your husband's mother. That's how it's always been. I zipped my suitcase. Then I opened the top drawer of the dresser and took out a small box with my few pieces of jewelry. Grandmother's amethyst earrings, my mother's wedding ring, an amber brooch bought in Svetlogorsk during our only seaside vacation, and a gold chain Victor had given me for our 10th anniversary. You bought yourself all this junk with my money, and now you're taking it? Victor muttered. It was so unfair it took my breath away. I had worked all these years. First as a teacher, then at the library, and for the last 5 years as a proofreader at a small publishing house. My small salary always went straight into the family budget, controlled by him. Documents, I said suddenly. I need my passport and work record book. What a burden you are, Victor grumbled, but he walked to the cupboard where we kept our papers. I sat on the edge of the bed. My legs felt weak. Where would I go? What would I do? I had almost no money, just 2,000 rubles hidden in a volume of Akhmatova's poems. Where would I live? Natashka. I needed to call Natasha. Victor came back and threw my passport on the bed. Didn't find your workbook, he muttered. He was lying. I knew for a fact all the documents were kept together. He was intentionally holding on to it so I couldn't get a new job, so I'd come crawling back. Give it to me, please, I said calmly. I'm going to need it. To hell with your demands. Victor barked, and I flinched at his shout. Try surviving without me first, then you can talk about rights. Just like back in the 90s when I was laid off from the school, and Victor worked 2 shifts to feed us. I went to interviews, but without connections, it was nearly impossible to get hired. He reminded me of this in every argument. I supported you, and you. But later, when I finally found work at the library, I supported him for 8 months, while his factory shut down and no one was paid. But he never mentioned that. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through my contacts. Natasha's number, saved just yesterday, lit up on the screen. I tapped call and turned to face the window. Hello. Her voice sounded surprised. It was almost 11 p.m. Natasha, it's me, Lena, my voice trembled. I'm leaving Victor. Can I stay with you? Just for a day or 2, until I figure something out. Victor let out a mocking laugh when he overheard me. Lyudmila Petrovna hissed something in outrage. Lenka, what happened? Natasha's voice was full of concerned worry. I didn't know how to explain it without bursting into tears. Victor poured hot soup on me. Over money for his mother. There was a pause. Then Natasha said, very calmly and very seriously, Do you remember the address? Karl Marx Street, Building 6, Apartment 47. I'm waiting. I'll leave the keys with the concierge if I need to. Thank you, I whispered. I remember. I'll be there soon. I ended the call and met Victor's eyes. They were filled with a mix of rage and disbelief. You've had your little tantrum. Now you'll go crying to that divorcee of yours. His lips twisted into a smirk. Go ahead. Live with her, bounce from couch to couch. You'll last 3 days, tops. Lyudmila Petrovna stepped right up to me, peering into my face from below. Small, frail, but with such bitterness inside her that she seemed larger, more imposing. Well, that's just fine, she sneered. Our dear Vitenka found himself a smart Moscow girl, and now she's got her nose in the air. You think you're irreplaceable. You know how many girls like you line up for one job. They wander the streets with degrees, but no one wants to work. They all want special treatment. I zipped up my old coat and picked up my suitcase. Felt surprisingly light. My entire 23-year life fit inside one battered suitcase. I'll come back later for the rest of my things and documents, I said, surprised at how calm I sounded. Not a chance, Victor blocked the doorway. You're gone. That's it. There's nothing here for you anymore. Vitya, I looked him in the eye. Don't do this. There are manuscripts in there. Photos of my parents. They're personal. Manuscripts. He burst out laughing. Those scraps of paper you scribble on at night. So that's what you've been doing while pretending to work, writing. Some second-rate wannabe author. He didn't know. All these years, he didn't know that I'd kept writing. Late at night, in secret, hiding pages among accounting documents. Stories, drafts, journals. The only thing that was truly mine. I never showed them to him again after that first time, when he read one of my stories and said, "What nonsense! Women's fluff. You'd be better off cooking a decent dinner." "Let me pass, please," I said quietly. He stepped aside, not out of respect, but because he was convinced I'd come crawling back. Where would I go after all, with no money, no home, no job? I stepped out of the apartment where I had lived for 23 years and walked down the stairs, avoiding the elevator. Once, Victor and I had kissed in that elevator like teenagers, coming back from a New Year's concert in 1992. Felt like that happened in another life between two different people. Outside, a light rain was falling. I hailed a cab, an unaffordable luxury in my budget. But I didn't care. Today my old life was crumbling, which meant a new one had to begin. Karl Marx Street, Building 6, I told the driver, leaning back and watching the lights of the night city slide past the window. The city suddenly felt so unfamiliar, so foreign. Natasha's apartment greeted me with the smell of coffee and fresh pastry. As if she had known I'd come. As if she had been waiting for me all these years. "My God, Lenka!" she gasped, seeing the stains on my blouse, visible even through my coat. "He nearly boiled you alive." Natasha had barely changed since our university days. Still the same dark curly hair, now with a graceful touch of gray. The same radiant eyes, fast gestures. Only the faint wrinkles at the corners of her eyes betrayed the years. She hugged me and something inside me cracked. The armor I had built over the years, the defense against pain, ridicule, humiliation, shattered. I sobbed on her shoulder like a child, helpless and desperate. There, Natasha stroked my back. "You did the right thing leaving. You did. You hear me?" I didn't feel like I had done the right thing. I felt old, lost, unwanted, discarded from the life I knew. And yet, strangely, deep inside, a small flicker burned. Faint, barely noticeable flame. "Oh, come." Natasha led me into the living room. "I made up the couch for you. Drop the suitcase. Let's go to the kitchen. You probably haven't eaten." Her little two-bedroom apartment was so cozy, so Natasha. Bookshelves from floor to ceiling, paintings on the walls, quirky ceramic figurines on the dresser. No crystal, no fancy china sets like the ones Victor and I collected for guests, while we drank from chipped mugs. In the kitchen, the table was set. Steaming mugs of coffee, a plate of cottage cheese casserole, jam in a small bowl. "Eat." Natasha pushed a plate toward me. "And tell me everything from the beginning." I picked up the fork, but the food stuck in my throat. "I don't even know where to start," I admitted. "Start from the last time we saw each other," Natasha offered, sitting across from me. "Remember Marina's birthday?" I remembered. 2 years ago, at our mutual university friend's house. Victor was with me the whole time, his hand on my knee. To an outsider it looked affectionate. But I knew better. It was control. After that visit he threw a fit. Apparently, I had been too friendly with Marina's brother. Playing the coquette. "You're almost 50. What a disgrace." I began to talk, first hesitantly with pauses, then more freely, diving deep into the bitter memories. How Victor slowly cut me off from friends, even from my own family. My mother died 5 years ago, and I couldn't go to the funeral. "There's no money for your gallivanting around," he said. I told her how every move of mine was controlled, every kopeck accounted for. He took my bank card, said I didn't know how to manage money and wasted it on nonsense. So he'd give me a weekly allowance, like a child, for groceries, clothing, household needs. I still used my salary. And then he'd complain that I bought the wrong meat, the wrong vegetables. Natasha listened in silence, occasionally shaking her head or clenching her jaw. But the worst, I continued, was how he kept reminding me how much I owed him, that I was nothing without him, a poor little village schoolteacher, that he had refined me, given me a roof, dressed me up in decent clothes. "Nonsense," Natasha snorted. "You were always 3 times smarter, more educated, and more talented than him." "But he worked when everything was falling apart in the 90s, I quietly objected. "He really did pull us through back then. And what? You didn't work," Natasha interrupted. "You worked like a horse. First in school for pennies, then at the library. And at home everything was on you. Plus his mother, always dissatisfied." "Lena, stop blaming yourself." I fell silent. For the first time in many years, someone was telling me I wasn't guilty of anything. That I didn't need to spend my whole life repaying a debt just because my husband once worked when there was unemployment all around. "I stopped writing," I said, and that admission was the hardest of all. "Well, I wrote secretly, but it was just fragments, sketches. Nothing serious. I forgot what it's like to create something entirely your own, something that belongs only to you." Natasha stood up, went to the shelf, and took out a softcover book. "Look," she placed it in front of me. "The Shadow of the Old Lilac. Natalia Voronova. This is your book." I couldn't believe my eyes. "You really published a book?" "My second one," she said proudly. "The first one sold out, a small print run of course, but still. And now I'm working on my third. Mystical detective novels. Not Donzova of course, but readers like them." I flipped through the pages, breathing in the scent of printing ink, and felt something new growing inside me. Not envy, admiration, and a strange, aching sense of loss. How much time I had wasted. How many stories that could have been born from my pen remained unwritten. "After the divorce it was hard," Natasha continued, pouring me more coffee. "Kolya left and took everything he could. I had to sell the apartment and start over at 45. Not exactly joyful. I worked 2 jobs. As a proofreader at a newspaper during the day and ran a creative writing club for seniors in the evening. Money was tight. I had to scrimp on everything." "How did you manage?" I asked, amazed. "Bit by bit," she smiled. "At first there were lots of tears and fear. Then came anger, real, healthy anger at the world, and especially at Kolya. And then I realized that for the first time in 20 years I was free. I could do what I wanted, write what I wanted, see who I wanted. And I didn't have to explain anything to anyone." She laughed, and there was no bitterness in that laugh, only the joy of liberation. "I started writing my first detective novel as therapy. The main character is a woman my age, just after a divorce. And you know the funniest part? In the book I kill off a character who looks just like Kolya, in the most twisted way. Literary revenge, you could say." I couldn't help but smile, imagining Natasha gleefully dispatching her unfaithful ex-husband in the pages of her novel. "And the publisher? How did you find it?" "I self-published the first one in a small run, gave copies to friends, brought some to libraries. Then one reader recommended it to her daughter, who works at a publishing house. They got interested and offered me a contract for the second book. Not Exmo, of course. The print run is small, the royalty symbolic, but still, it's a real publisher. Natasha spoke with such enthusiasm that I caught myself thinking, when was the last time I had seen someone so genuinely happy, so proud of their own accomplishments? You know, I still write sometimes, I admitted quietly. Short stories, little sketches from life. Nothing special. Will you show me? Natasha brightened instantly. I shook my head. They're still at home. In an old folder in the closet. And my work record book too. Victor didn't give it to me. Natasha's smile faded. That's bad, she frowned. Without your work record, getting a job will be hard. Although, nowadays many places hire with just a copy if you explain the situation. But still. And all my photos are there. Letters from my parents. My manuscripts. Suddenly I realized how much I had left behind in that house. Not just things, parts of myself. Don't worry, Natasha squeezed my hand. We'll get them. If you can't go yourself, I'll go. Or we'll call the police. He has no right to withhold your documents. I imagined the police coming to our. No, not our Victor's apartment. Neighbors peeking out from behind their doors, whispering. Did you hear? The Krulov woman ran away from her husband. Now she's getting her stuff back with the cops. People will talk, I began. Let them talk. Natasha cut me off. Lena, wake up. Who cares what the neighbors say? What matters is that you got out. That you're alive. That you have a future. She was right, of course. But years of habit, worrying about appearances, about what people would think, they don't fade so easily. We'll deal with the documents and your things tomorrow, Natasha said. For now, you need rest. Drink some more coffee and go to sleep. You've had a rough day. I nodded, feeling the weight of exhaustion settle over me. The warmth of Natasha's kitchen, the smell of coffee, her genuine care. They soothed me, dissolved the tension that had been building for years. Do you think I can start over? I asked, rising from the table. At my age, with no money, no job, no home of my own. I did, Natasha answered simply. So can you. You're stronger than you think, Lenka. You've always been stronger. I lay down on the pull-out sofa in the living room and pulled a soft plaid blanket over myself. The walls here were covered in wallpaper with tiny floral patterns. Nothing like our apartment, where Victor insisted on harsh stripes. No frills. No flowers. We're not living in a village, he used to say. But I always loved flowers. Before bed, I took out my phone to check for messages. 5 missed calls from Victor. 3 voice messages. I didn't listen to them. I knew what they'd say. First threats. Then pleading to come back. Then more threats. I silenced the phone and slipped it under my pillow. Outside, the city hummed in the night. A dog barked somewhere. Few cars drove past. I lay there with my eyes open, replaying the day. How he dumped soup on me. How he stared in rage. How he threatened, insulted. For the first time, I saw our life so clearly, as if a veil had been lifted from my eyes. And yet I used to excuse him. He has a hard job. He's stressed about the loan. He's just tired. Finding excuses for an abuser is the easiest thing in the world. Admitting that you're unloved, used, that you're not a person but a function is so much harder. How did I live like that? How did I endure it for 23 years? I asked myself, staring into the darkness. And I had no answer. Toward morning, I dreamed of my mother. She sat in the kitchen of our village house, sorting blueberries and smiling at me. Lenotchka, you've always been the smartest, the most capable. Study well, my daughter, so you can live a happy life. She believed education would save me from the fate of a village woman. And what came of it? I got my diploma with honors, moved to the city, and became a servant to my husband and his mother. The morning was overcast but strangely bright. I awoke to the smell of fresh pastry. Natasha was already bustling in the kitchen, whistling some tune from our youth. I think it was, "We are an echo, we are an echo, we are the long echo of each other." The song from The Irony of Fate. The one we watched every New Year's like all Soviet families. I lay there, studying the unfamiliar ceiling. A strange feeling filled me, as if I had returned to youth, when anything was possible. When the future felt bright and full of promise. Before Victor. Before marriage. Before the bleak existence I had mistakenly called a life. Natasha peeked into the room, wiping her hands on a kitchen towel. "Good morning." "How?" "It felt strange sleeping in a new place," I admitted, sitting up on the bed. "The dreams were so vivid. I dreamed of my mom." "That's a good sign," Natasha nodded. "It means she's with you, supporting you." I had never believed in the supernatural, omens, or the afterlife. But now, the thought that my mother was somewhere up there in the sky, approving of my escape from the prison of an unhappy marriage, somehow warmed my soul. "Breakfast is on the table," Natasha said. "I'll go shower and then we'll talk about plans." Plans. I hadn't had plans in years. Just routine. Work, home, cooking, cleaning, back to work again. Victor decided everything for the both of us. We're going to the dacha with Serioza. We're taking out a loan for renovations. We're not going on vacation this year. I couldn't even remember the last time I made a decision about my own life. In the kitchen there were fresh cinnamon rolls, coffee, and cottage cheese with sour cream. Just like childhood, when Mom would treat me on weekends with this simple little delight. I spread some butter on a roll, took a bite, and nearly cried from the rush of memories. Natasha came back quickly, her wet hair wrapped in a towel, fresh and energetic. "All right, Lenka, let's think," she said, sitting across from me and pouring herself coffee. "First things first, we need to get your documents and personal belongings back. Can't go anywhere without them." I winced at the thought of facing Victor again. "He won't give them back," I said quietly. "You don't know him. He's changed over the years. He's become harsher, crueler." "Then we won't ask." Natasha squinted slyly. "I know a local precinct officer, Mikhail Stepanovich. Good man. Helped me when Kolya tried to clear out the apartment after our divorce. We'll call him, explain the situation, and go to Victor's place with him." "With the police." "With the police." I looked up, frightened. "No, Natasha, that's too much." "Too much," she cut in. "Too much is when your husband dumps hot soup on you, claiming your legal right to your own documents and belongings. That's normal. By the way, when you say manuscripts, what exactly do you mean?" I felt embarrassed, like we were talking about something shameful. "Just different stories, diaries, sketches of a novel I never finished." "How much?" Natasha asked matter-of-factly. "A whole box. I kept them on the top shelf in an old shoebox from my winter boots." Victor never looked up there. "And you're absolutely right to want them back," my friend nodded. "They're a part of you. Your creativity. Your soul on paper." She spoke like my scribblings were something real, valuable. As if I hadn't just been playing around but doing something true and meaningful. "All right," I said, finally deciding. "Let's call your precinct officer. But what am I going to tell him? That I ran away from my husband because of soup?" "You'll tell him you left after a domestic violence incident," Natasha said firmly. Because that's what it was. Victor didn't accidentally spill the soup. He threw it at you. That's abuse, Lena. And probably not the first time. She was right. Victor had never physically hurt me before. At least not so openly or deliberately. But weren't his constant nitpicking, humiliation, and control also a kind of violence? We called Mikhail Stepanovich. Natasha did most of the talking. She was quick and professional, clearly explaining the situation and stressing that my husband was illegally withholding personal documents. The officer agreed to help, but only in the afternoon. Perfect, Natasha said, ending the call. We'll meet him at 4 near your house. Until then, we've got time to sort out other things. What things? I asked, bewildered. Work, housing, finances, she said, ticking them off on her fingers. The basics of your new independent life. Sounded terrifying, and at the same time exciting. For the first time in many years, I could decide for myself where and how to live. I had almost no money, the future was murky, but still. I have a small stash, I confessed. 2,000 rubles. Not much, Natasha chuckled. But enough to start. Listen, I have a suggestion. Remember Marinka Sokolova? She works at Lira Publishing now. The same one that published my book. The same one? Yes. Exactly. Natasha raised a triumphant finger. They're looking for a proofreader. Their old lady, Ninochka, retired and they're swamped. They're launching a new line of women's fiction. The pay isn't exactly Gazprom, but it's enough to live on. And the best part, the atmosphere. You'll be surrounded by books, by creative people. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You think they'll take me? No work record. And at my age. What's wrong with your age? Natasha protested. You're 45, not 95. And you have proofreading experience. Plus, Marinka knows you personally. She remembers what a brilliant student you were. And we're getting that work record back. It all sounded like a fairy tale. A job in publishing, something I dreamed of back in university before I got married and settled down, as Victor used to say. What about housing? Asked cautiously. I can't live on your couch forever. That's the next step, Natasha said, opening her laptop. Look here. There's a room for rent not far from here. Quiet neighborhood, good transport access. The landlord was an elderly retired teacher, renting out a room in a 2-bedroom apartment. I looked at the screen. Just a simple room in an ordinary flat, but it would be mine. No Victor. No Ludmila Petrovna. No constant tension and fear. How much? I asked, anxiety already rising at the thought of numbers. Natasha named the price, and I gasped. It was a bit more than my entire previous salary. Expensive, she admitted. But by Moscow standards, it's normal. And with a publishing job, you'll manage. Besides, it's only temporary, until you get on your feet. I stared at the pictures of the room, trying to imagine myself living there. Alone. Managing my own money. Deciding when to come home, what to eat for dinner. Felt both scary and incredibly liberating. Let's talk to Marinka about the job first, I suggested. If that works out, then we can think about the room. Smart. Natasha agreed and immediately dialed the number. The call with Marinka was brief and to the point. Old friendship. They only briefly recalled the past. Mostly they discussed my work experience, skills, and potential salary. I listened as Natasha praised me. Best philology student of her class, phenomenal literacy, extensive experience, and felt like an imposter. Did she really think that about me, or was she just helping a friend in need? It's settled, Natasha declared after ending the call. You have an interview tomorrow at 11 o'clock. Just a formality, of course, but still. Thank you, I said, stunned by how fast everything was moving. I don't even know what to say. You'll say it later, when you publish your first book, Natasha winked. Speaking of books, since we've got some time before the precinct meeting, maybe you'll read mine? I'm curious to hear what you think. She handed me her book, and I took it with something close to reverence. A real, published book by my friend, with a cover, author name, and blurb on the back. I opened the first page and the world around me disappeared. Natasha's style was instantly recognizable. Lively, energetic, with a touch of irony. The main character, a former literature teacher named Vera Nikolaevna, was investigating a strange incident in a small provincial town. While the detective plot was fairly traditional, the text had a real depth, knowledge of life, understanding of human nature. I read, forgetting about time, about my problems, about the upcoming meeting with Victor. Natasha tactfully didn't disturb me, busying herself with other tasks. She typed on her laptop and occasionally spoke on the phone. The ring of her mobile pulled me out of the book's world. Yes, Mikhail Stepanovich, Natasha answered. Of course, we'll be there. Then her face changed. He came to you himself and filed a report. She looked at me with alarm. I raised my head, feeling my chest go cold. Victor went to the police. Why? I see, Natasha frowned, listening to the precinct officer. Yes, of course, we'll still come as agreed. She ended the call and looked at me. Your husband didn't waste time. He went to the station and reported that you stole family money and valuables. He's demanding a criminal case be opened. I felt the ground slip from under my feet. What money? What valuables? I have nothing, only those 2,000 rubles. Of course, Natasha nodded. Mikhail Stepanovich didn't believe him either, but he had to accept the report. It's standard procedure. He says it's even more important now that you come and provide your statement. Victor's trying to get ahead of us, she continued. He knew sooner or later you'd come for your documents and belongings, so he decided to paint you as a thief. So the neighbors, the police, everyone thinks you left not because of abuse but because you stole something. What does he want from me? I cried out in despair. Why can't he just let me go? Because people like him don't let go, Natasha replied sharply. They need control, power. He'll fight to the last breath, just to avoid admitting you have the right to your own life. Sounded terrifying. I suddenly realized that leaving Victor was only the first step. A battle lay ahead, long and exhausting perhaps. Maybe it's easier to go back, I muttered as panic rose inside me. Apologize, say I overreacted. Lena. Natasha gripped my shoulders and looked me in the eyes. Listen carefully. That man threw hot soup at you. Understand. He could have burned you much worse. Today it was soup. Tomorrow it'll be boiling water. That's how abuse escalates. It only gets worse. She didn't finish her sentence, but I understood. Until something irreversible happens. Now go wash up and pull yourself together, Natasha ordered. And wear something decent. We're going to the police, and it's important to make a good impression. I obediently went to the bathroom, examining my reflection in the mirror, a tired woman with a dull gaze. Once I had been pretty. But years of anxiety, sleeplessness, and constant tension had taken their toll. Wrinkles at the corners of my eyes, a bitter crease near my mouth, gray in my hair. Who is this? Ask myself. Is this really me? Is this all that's left of the girl who once dreamed of writing books? I remembered Natasha's novel and her heroine, a woman over 50 who found the strength to start a new life, a new career, to challenge her circumstances. Fictional, yes. But hadn't Natasha done the same? Started over after her divorce. If she could do it, so can I told my reflection. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A message from Victor. Either you come home by evening or I'm filing for divorce. And forget the apartment. You didn't put anything into it. I showed the message to Natasha. What a bastard, she muttered, handing my phone back. He thinks he can scare you. What if he really does file for divorce? I asked, my insides clenching with fear. Perfect, Natasha exclaimed. Let him. It'll save you time and money. And don't listen to his threats about the apartment. First, it's jointly acquired property. Second, you've worked for years. That's a contribution too. Even if not direct mortgage payments, it's still labor for the family. I wasn't so sure. The apartment, though registered to both of us, had come from Victor's parents. They sold their old Khrushchevka and helped pay for this one. Technically, I really hadn't contributed much financially. Let's set the apartment aside for now, Natasha decided, seeing my hesitation. Right now, our priority is your documents and personal belongings. We'll deal with property division later. So get ready, we're leaving soon. While I got myself together, Natasha searched the internet, made calls, jotted notes in her notebook. I overheard fragments of her conversations about family law, divorce proceedings, psychological support for women in difficult situations. Finally, we were ready. I wore my only decent dress, a dark blue one with a collar, and my old low-heeled shoes. Natasha critically examined me and pulled a scarf from her closet. Here, add some flair. And keep your back straight. You need to look confident. We went downstairs where Mikhail Stepanovich was already waiting, a lean man in his 40s, with a keen gaze and neatly trimmed mustache. He wore civilian clothes, but something in his bearing clearly marked him as a law enforcement officer. Ladies, he nodded. Here's the plan. First, we'll go to the station. I'll take your statement regarding your husband's complaint. Then we'll go to your home for your documents and belongings. If your husband obstructs, we'll write up a protocol. What if he's not home? I asked, secretly hoping for that. Then you'll have to wait or come back another day, the officer shrugged. Without his presence or your own key, we can't enter. We rode to the station in Mikhail Stepanovich's service car, a plain Lada with worn seats. I looked out the window at people hurrying about their business and wondered, how many of them are like me? Women living in constant fear, obeying their husbands out of duty or habit. And how many found the strength to change everything? The station was cool and smelled like paperwork. Mikhail Stepanovich led us into his office, a small room with 2 desks, a computer, and a safe in the corner. On the wall hung a portrait of the president and a calendar with kittens. An odd combination. Please sit, Elena Nikolaevna, he said, looking at the paperwork. I'm going to record your statement about your husband's accusation. I sat across from him, folding my hands on my lap like a schoolgirl. Natasha sat beside me, nodding encouragingly. So, Viktor Andreevich Krulov claims that last night you left the family residence with 10,000 rubles and gold jewelry of significant value. What do you say to that? I sighed, trying to speak calmly. That's not true. I only have 2,000 rubles with me, my personal savings, and a few pieces of jewelry that belong to me personally. My wedding ring, my mother's ring, earrings that belonged to my grandmother, and a couple of inexpensive items given to me over the years, I said. The officer nodded and took notes. And why did you leave the house? He asked. Faltered. How could I explain 23 years of humiliation, control, and psychological pressure? How could I talk about what had been killing me slowly, day by day? Yesterday, my husband poured hot soup on me because I refused to hand over my bank card to his mother, I finally said, deciding to start with a specific incident. That was the last straw. I realized I couldn't live like that anymore. Mikhail Stepanovich looked up from his papers. Hot soup. Do you have any burns? Did you go to the clinic? No, I shook my head. No burns, just redness. I rinsed the skin with cold water right away. I understand, he said, jotting something down again. Has there been any previous physical abuse from your husband? I hesitated. No physical violence, I admitted honestly. Victor never hit me. He operated more subtly, with words, looks, silence, small humiliations. I met Natasha's eyes, and she gave me an encouraging nod. There was something else. He controlled all my money, restricted communication with friends and relatives, constantly criticized and belittled me. And yesterday, for the first time, he crossed the line. The officer looked at me with a strange expression, something between sympathy and fatigue. I understand, he said at last. You see, from a legal point of view, psychological abuse is harder to prove. But as for your departure and the alleged theft, that's more straightforward. Your husband's complaint is unlikely to have any consequences, since there's no evidence of a crime. He finished writing and handed me my statement to read. I signed it, feeling a strange sense of relief, as if I had crossed a threshold. For the first time in a long while, I had officially stated what had been happening in our home. I had called things by their real names. Now we'll go to your home, Mikhail Stepanovich said, standing up. Hopefully, your husband will be there, and we can settle the matter of your documents peacefully. Peacefully. After I had left, after his police report, after the threatening messages, I doubted Victor was capable of resolving anything peacefully right now. On the way home, I felt a growing anxiety. My heart was pounding, my palms were sweaty. I looked at the familiar streets, buildings, parks, as if seeing them for the last time. I was saying goodbye to the place where I had spent most of my adult life. There was our building, a typical 9-story apartment block from the late 80s. I slowed down involuntarily, looking at the familiar windows of the 4th floor. Behind those panes of glass and bricks lay a part of my life. Photos, books, manuscripts, things I couldn't imagine my future without. We'll get everything back, Natasha encouraged me, noticing my hesitation. On the bench near the entrance sat 2 elderly ladies, Klavdia Petrovna and Nina Semyonovna, our neighbors from the 2nd floor. Seeing me with unfamiliar people, they fell silent and stared with barely concealed curiosity. Hello, I nodded to them, trying to stay calm and composed. Hello, Lenotchka, Klavdia Petrovna said slowly. Nina and I are just getting some air. Your Victor's been home for a while now. Came with his mother, so he's not at work. And Ludmila Petrovna's with him. Perfect ingredients for a scandal. We went up to the 4th floor. With every step, my heart pounded harder. What would I say to them? What would Victor say? Would he lose control in front of a stranger? Mikhail Stepanovich rang the doorbell. Long pause. Then footsteps. Victor opened the door, unshaven, red-eyed from lack of sleep, but wearing his best shirt, as if expecting guests. He looked us over, pausing on Mikhail Stepanovich, and his expression changed. The forced friendliness vanished, replaced by caution. District Officer Solovyov, said Mikhail Stepanovich, showing his badge. I'm here regarding the complaint you filed earlier, and also to assist your wife in retrieving her personal belongings and documents. What documents? Victor crossed his arms and blocked the entrance. She's got everything with her. Viktor Andreevich, the officer said calmly but firmly. Let's not complicate the situation. Elena Nikolaevna claims that you're withholding her work record, passport, and personal items, including manuscripts. By law, you have no right to deny her access to them. Manuscripts? Viktor scoffed. Nonsense. Vitya, I stepped forward, trying to speak calmly. You know what I'm talking about. Just give me my documents and that old shoebox from the overhead shelf. And the photo albums, the ones with pictures of my parents. Behind him appeared Lyudmila Petrovna. Small, dry, lips pursed tightly. Well, look who finally showed up, she said, seeing me. And she brought the police. Against her own husband. Disgraceful. Lyudmila Petrovna, the officer interjected. Please don't escalate the situation. We're here to resolve this matter peacefully and within the law. Viktor hesitated. I could see it on his face. He hadn't expected me to come with the police. And with a friend as a witness, no less. He thought I'd crawl back alone, humiliated, desperate to get my papers. Fine. Come in, he muttered, stepping aside. But just so you know, everything she told you is a lie. I'm the one who suffered in this marriage for 23 years. The apartment smelled familiar. Lyudmila Petrovna's pastries, Viktor's cologne, pine-scented floor cleaner. I couldn't help but inhale. Smelled like home. But now that scent brought not comfort but unease. I'll show you, I said, leading the officer to the hallway closet. My documents should be in the top drawer. Viktor followed us, mumbling about ingratitude and betrayal. Natasha stayed close, like a bodyguard ready to jump in if needed. Opened the drawer. Among the papers I found my passport, my health insurance card, our marriage certificate. But the work record book wasn't there. It's not here, I turned to Viktor. Where's my workbook? No idea. He shrugged with exaggerated indifference. Maybe you left it at work. Or lost it during one of your hysterics. Viktor, said Mikhail Stepanovich, his voice taking on an official tone, if you're withholding your wife's documents, that can have legal consequences. I strongly advise you to return the work record. Viktor and Lyudmila Petrovna exchanged a glance, a quick, almost invisible look. But I recognized that gesture. That's how they always conspired silently when they needed to act together. Against me. You're imagining things, officer, Viktor smirked. I don't have her workbook. Very well, said the officer. We'll write a report. Keep in mind, if it's found later, the situation will be treated very differently. He took a form out of his folder and began filling it out. Now my personal things and manuscripts, I said, heading toward the bedroom. They're on the top shelf, in an old shoebox. I approached the stepladder by the wall, but Viktor rushed ahead. I'll get it myself, he snapped. Wouldn't want you to fall and accuse me of pushing you. He climbed the stepladder, opened the overhead cabinet, and reached into the back. There's no box here. What do you mean, no box? I went cold. It's always been there behind the suitcases. A brown shoebox from the Ikonica shoe store. Must have thrown it out during cleaning, Viktor replied indifferently. Who knows what kind of junk we've accumulated over 20 years? Something inside me snapped. My stories, my diaries, my novel drafts. Everything I had secretly written all these years. Everything that had kept me from breaking completely. Did he really throw them out? Or burn them? Or hide them to blackmail me later? You couldn't have thrown them out, I said, barely holding back the tremor in my voice. You didn't even know they existed. Oh, those papers you scribbled on at night. Viktor climbed down the ladder and looked me straight in the eyes. I've known about them for a long time. and I've read them. Pathetic attempts to play the writer. You think you have talent? That's laughable. Natasha stepped forward as if to defend me, but I stopped her with a gesture. This was my battle. Where are they, Vitya? I asked quietly. You know how much they mean to me. No idea. He turned away. Probably threw them out with the rest of the trash. I didn't believe him. I knew Victor. He never threw anything out just like that. If my manuscripts were gone, it meant he had either hidden or destroyed them, deliberately. Why? Out of spite. Out of a desire to hurt me. Let's make a list of the items you plan to take, Mikhail Stepanovich suggested, seeing the situation escalating. And we'll note that the work record and manuscripts are currently not found. I nodded, feeling a lump rise in my throat. Losing the manuscripts was like losing a part of myself. All those stories, thoughts, feelings I had entrusted only to paper. Let's check the storage room too, Natasha suggested. Maybe he moved them there. We searched every closet, cabinet, shelf. No luck. Either Victor had truly destroyed my manuscripts, or he had hidden them where we'd never think to look. Finally, the protocol was drawn up regarding the missing work record. I gathered the remaining personal items. Photo albums, a few books with inscriptions, an old jewelry box my mother had given me. It all fit into a large bag, which Lyudmila Petrovna handed to me in silence, apparently eager to get rid of us. Can I have a moment? I asked just as we were about to leave. I want to check one more thing. Without waiting for a reply, I went into the kitchen and opened the cupboard above the stove. There, behind a stack of cookbooks, stood a small ceramic box, a gift from my first student when I worked at school. In it, I kept my most treasured items. A lock of my mother's hair, a note from my father written before his death, an old brooch I had worn to my graduation. The box was still there. I opened it and saw everything inside was untouched. At least this Victor hadn't found or thrown away. When I returned to the hallway holding the box, Victor was looking at me with a strange expression, a mix of anger, sadness, and regret. I couldn't quite tell. You'll regret this, he said quietly, just loud enough for me to hear. You'll live with your divorcee friend, bounce between rented rooms. Then you'll come crawling back. And then I'll decide if I take you back. Once, those words would have made me shrink with fear, look for compromise, back down. But now I looked at Victor and saw just a frightened, aging man, afraid of being alone, addicted to control and power, unable to imagine another way of living. Goodbye, Vitya, I said, meeting his eyes. I hope you find peace. We stepped out onto the stairwell. Natasha and Mikhail Stepanovich walked ahead. I followed behind, closing our small procession. My heart felt heavy. The loss of the manuscripts felt irreparable. But at the same time, I felt a strange lightness. I was saying goodbye. To that home, to that life, to the man I had spent 23 years with. And for the first time in a long while, I wasn't afraid of the future. Outside, the officer's car was waiting. Natasha and I sat in the back seat. The bag with my belongings rested between us. So what now? I asked, looking at the receding building through the window. Now your new life begins, Natasha replied, squeezing my hand. Tomorrow's the interview at the publishing house. Then we'll go see the room I found for you. And tonight, we'll celebrate your first day of freedom. I bought a bottle of good wine. The car drove along familiar streets, but they looked different. Brighter, sharper, more real. As if a veil had lifted from my eyes and the world finally appeared as it truly was. That evening, sitting in Natasha's kitchen, I told her about the lost manuscripts. That's awful, she said with sympathy. So much work, so much soul poured into them. But maybe there's a kind of symbolism in it. A new life, new stories. You'll start writing again, and maybe it will be even better than before. You think so? Asked doubtful. At my age, starting over. There it is again. At my age. Natasha exclaimed. Lena, you're 45. Clarissa Pinkola Estes was first published after 50. Vera Brittain published her first novel at 40. Toni Morrison at 40. Laura Ingalls Wilder started the Little House series at 65. She spoke with such passion I couldn't help but smile. You're good at convincing, I admitted. Maybe I really will write something worthwhile again. But I still grieve for those lost texts. Of course you do, Natasha agreed. But listen to me. Everything you've been through, everything you've felt all these years, it's still inside you. And maybe losing the old manuscripts is just a sign. It's time to write a new story. Your own. Thought about it. Maybe she was right. Maybe I needed to let go of the past. Not just Victor, not just our life, but the texts born in an atmosphere of fear and submission. Where do I begin? I asked, feeling a long-forgotten excitement stir within me. With the first word, Natasha replied simply, handing me a clean notebook and a pen. Here. This is for you. Start right now. Write about what happened yesterday. About the soup, the decision to leave, the first step toward your new life. I took the notebook and weighed it in my hands. So light, with blank pages ready to hold any story. My story. The soup burned instantly. I didn't even have time to understand what had happened. I began, and the words flowed on their own, as if they'd been waiting for this moment for years. Natasha quietly stood and left the room, leaving me alone with my story. The first one I had written not in secret, not in fear that someone would see and judge, but freely, openly. I wrote late into the night, and when I finally went to bed, for the first time in years, I felt truly alive. The next morning started with a phone call. Still groggy, I reached for my phone under the pillow and answered without looking. Hello. Lena, it's me. Victor's voice was unusually quiet. We need to talk. I instantly woke up, sitting upright in bed. It was still dark outside. The clock showed 6 a.m. About what, Vitya? I think we said everything yesterday. I found your work record, he said after a pause. And the box with your manuscripts too. My heart skipped a beat. So he hadn't thrown them away. There was a chance to get my texts back. I can bring them to you, Victor continued. But let's meet without your new friends. There was something in his voice, so familiar yet for the first time uncertain. Victor wasn't demanding. He was almost pleading. And that was so unlike him it startled me. Why, Vitya? Why all this? I asked quietly. Yesterday, you pretended not to know anything about my manuscripts. Why the change today? He was silent, then sighed. Because I'm not an idiot, Lena. I can see you're serious. This isn't one of your usual stunts after which you come back, having thought it all through. You really want a divorce, don't you? I hadn't expected such a direct question. All my life, Victor had avoided uncomfortable topics, preferring to pretend problems didn't exist if left unspoken. Yes, I replied, surprised by my own firmness. I want a divorce, Vitya. That decision is final. I see, he said with bitterness in his voice. Well then, I won't stand in your way. I'll file the paperwork myself, if that's what you really want. But can we meet? Talk like human beings, not through officers and lawyers. It was so unlike Victor that I became suspicious. Had he really come to terms with our situation, accepted it without fights and accusations? It was hard to believe. Let's meet at a cafe, I suggested, deciding not to take any chances. At Chokoladnitsa on Tverskaya. There are always lots of people there. All right, he agreed too quickly. Today at 2. Will that work? I have an interview at the publishing house at 11, I said, remembering my meeting with Marinka. I don't know how long it'll last. Let's meet at 4 instead. At the publishing house. There was a flicker of surprise in his voice. You already found a job. Just an interview so far, I replied cautiously. I see, he said again. All right, for it is. I'll be waiting for you at Chokoladnitsa. He hung up and I sat there for a while staring at my phone. Something had changed. Victor had never been this agreeable, this open to compromise. What happened overnight? Just the realization that I wouldn't come back or something else? Who was calling so early? Natasha peeked into the room, wrapped in a terry robe. Vitya, I set the phone aside. He says he found my work record and manuscripts, wants to meet and hand them over. And you believed him? Natasha raised an eyebrow skeptically. I don't know, I admitted. He sounded strange, not like himself. He said he'd even file for divorce himself if that's what I want. No drama. That's suspicious. Natasha sat on the edge of the bed. From the way you've described Victor, he doesn't strike me as someone who lets go easily. Maybe it's a trick, to lure you into a meeting and then pressure you, threaten you. I thought the same. That's why I suggested meeting in a public place. But there was something in Victor's voice. Almost sincere, almost human. All right, we'll deal with that after the interview, Natasha said as she stood up. For now, up you get. You need to get ready. Coffee's almost done. The interview at Lira Publishing went much better than I expected. Marinka, now the respectable Marina Alexandrovna, deputy editor-in-chief, greeted me like an old friend with hugs, memories, and genuine interest in my life. She tactfully didn't ask about the reasons for my sudden move. Evidently, Natasha had already filled her in. The publishing house office spanned 2 floors of an old mansion near Chisty Prudi. Despite the modern equipment and computers, it retained the atmosphere of a literary salon from the early 20th century. High ceilings, stucco moldings, antique bookcases, cozy armchairs in the corners. We have a great team, Marinka said, leading me through the offices. Mostly women, but a few men too, in the layout and accounting departments. The salary is standard for Moscow, plus bonuses if we meet our targets. The schedule is flexible. The main thing is to get the work done on time. Then I was introduced to the director of the publishing house, an intelligent woman around 60. She asked me a few professional questions, listened carefully to my answers, and nodded. Well, I see you have enough experience. Marina Alexandrovna vouches for you, and she's very strict about personnel. When can you start working? I was caught off guard. Everything was happening too quickly. What about a probationary period? The paperwork. We'll prepare the documents in the next few days. The director smiled. As for the probation, yes, it's 3 months, of course. But you can start working as soon as tomorrow. We're in a bit of a crunch with a new book series. Then, how about Monday? I suggested, still trying to wrap my head around the fact that I'd just been hired. Hired for a real job. In a real publishing house. Excellent, the director nodded. Marina Alexandrovna will get you up to speed. And welcome to Lira, Elena Nikolaevna. We stepped out of the office and I finally caught my breath. Marinka, this is just a miracle, I confessed. I thought I'd have to go through dozens of interviews and prove my competence. Lena, you're a great professional, she replied simply. Come on, I've known you forever and I know I can count on you. And in our line of work, that's everything. She lowered her voice slightly. By the way, Natashka told me you write. Is it true? Blushed. Well, not exactly right. I try sometimes. Let me read something, Marinka said immediately with interest. Not for publishing, just out of curiosity. Although, who knows, we're actually looking for new authors for our new women's fiction series. If your stuff's good. My manuscripts are still with my husband, I faltered, not yet used to calling Victor my ex. He promised to return them today, but I'm not sure they're still in good condition. Well, when you get them, bring them in. Marinka patted me on the shoulder. Now come on, I'll show you your workspace. I left the publishing house in high spirits, feeling a flicker of hope in my chest. Job. A real job at a publishing house. Something I had dreamed of back in my student days. Even if it was just as a proofreader, not an editor, let alone a writer, still I would be among books, among creative people. I called Natasha to share the news. I knew it, she exclaimed. Congratulations, Lenka. We have to celebrate this. Come back. I have a surprise for you. Another surprise. Or now. Natashka had already done so much for me in just these past 2 days that I felt awkward, as if I were taking advantage of her kindness and friendship. There were still a few hours before my meeting with Victor, so I decided to return to Natasha's place to change and gather my thoughts. What would I say to him? How would I behave? Just the thought of seeing him made my heart race. My palms started sweating. So many years spent together. And now we were practically strangers. Natasha met me with a mysterious smile. So, ready for your surprise? She asked as I crossed the threshold. Ready, but I'm a little scared, I admitted. Your surprises lately have turned my life upside down. In a good way, I hope. She winked and handed me a piece of paper. Take a look. It was a listing for a small one-room apartment near Sokolniki Metro. The price was more than reasonable for Moscow. This is for me. I didn't understand what Natasha was getting at. For you, she nodded. It's my aunt's place. She's moved in with her daughter in St. Petersburg. She used to rent it to students, but it just became available. I arranged everything. First 2 months at a discounted price, then we'll see. The best part is it's fully furnished. It has everything, from bedsheets to pots and pans. You can move in tomorrow if you want. I didn't know what to say. Job. Place to live. Everything was falling into place so perfectly, it felt like a dream. Could it really be that fate was finally turning toward me? Natasha. I don't know how to thank you, I whispered, feeling tears well up in my eyes. Don't be silly, she hugged me. What are friends for? You'd do the same for me, she said. I knew it was true. I would have, without hesitation. I just never had the chance. Victor would never have allowed me to help a friend with money or housing. But that's not all. Natasha stepped back and looked me in the eyes. I called Sergei Pavlovich. Remember that lawyer who helped me with my divorce? He agreed to consult you for free, as a friend. He's a top professional, knows all the legal nuances. Trust me. He won't let your Victor leave you without a penny. I was stunned. So much help, so much support from someone I hadn't seen in 2 years. What had I done to deserve such friendship? Thank you, was all I could manage, trying not to cry. Thank you for everything. Come on, don't get all weepy. Natasha patted my shoulder. You have an important day ahead. First the meeting with Victor, then we go see the apartment. By the way, do you think he'll actually return your manuscripts? Or is this just a trick to lure you into a meeting? Shrug. I don't know. He sounded strange on the phone. Almost human. Many abusers become human when they realize their victim is slipping away, Natasha snorted. It's part of the manipulation. First the carrot, and if that doesn't work, the stick again. I knew she was right. And yet, something in Victor's voice made me think this time might be different. Maybe our meeting would really help us put an end to everything, if not as friends, then at least not as enemies. I arrived at Chokoladnitsa right at 4 o'clock. Victor was already there, sitting at a table by the window, nervously tapping his fingers on the tabletop. In front of him was a cup of untouched coffee and a brown shoebox, the very one with my manuscripts. When he saw me, he stood up. We greeted each other awkwardly, for the first time in years, without the usual kiss on the cheek. I sat down across from him, trying not to show my nervousness. "How are you?" Victor asked, and something like genuine concern rang in his voice. "Fine," I replied coolly. "Better than I expected." Pause followed. We looked at each other like strangers, unsure where to begin. Finally, Victor nudged the box toward me. "Here are your manuscripts. I didn't read them if that's what you're worried about." "You said you did," I reminded him. "I lied," he shrugged. "I wanted to hurt you. I'm sorry." That was so unlike Victor. To admit he was wrong. To apologize. Cautiously, I opened the box. Inside were my notebooks, handwritten pages, old diaries, everything in place, untouched. "And this?" He took my work record book from the inside pocket of his jacket. "It really was just in the drawer with your papers. I didn't hide it on purpose." I took the record book, flipping through it absently. Strangely, I believed him. For all his faults, Victor rarely lied outright. He preferred to omit, to dodge, but not lie to your face. "Thank you," I said softly, putting the documents in my bag. "No problem." He took a sip of his coffee and grimaced. It had gone cold. "Do you really want a divorce?" he asked, straight to the point. No preamble. But once I had loved that straightforwardness in him, that honesty. When did it all change? "Yes," I answered, looking him in the eye. "It's final, Vitya." He nodded, as if I had confirmed something he already knew. "I filed the application with the local court, as required." I was surprised at how informed he was. Victor had never been one for legal details. "I consulted a lawyer," he explained, seeing my surprise. "Decided to do everything properly. Divorce. Property division. I want to offer you a deal." "What kind of deal?" asked cautiously. "The apartment stays with me," he began, and I tensed. I knew it. "But I'll pay you compensation, 3 million rubles. That's roughly a third of the apartment's value, considering it was originally bought with my parents' money." I said nothing, processing. 3 million. That was a significant sum. Enough to buy a small apartment outside the city or use as a down payment for a mortgage. "And also," Victor continued, "furniture, appliances. Take what you want, except for my mom's china cabinet, of course." "Does your mother know about your offer?" asked skeptically. "No," he smirked. "And she won't until it's too late. This is my decision, Lena. I don't want a war. I don't want dirt, scandals, lawsuits. Let's separate civilly." Sounded reasonable. More than reasonable. But I still didn't understand what was behind this sudden generosity. "Why, Vitya?" asked directly. "Why the change? Just yesterday you were threatening me, filing a police report. Now you're offering me 3 million. What changed?" He was silent for a long time, looking out the window at the passers-by. Then he sighed. "I spoke with Sashka last night. Remember him? My friend from the factory. Lives in Pushkino." I remembered. A quiet man with sad eyes who rarely visited and even more rarely spoke about personal matters. His wife left him 3 years ago, Victor continued. Same situation, fights, threats, trying to keep her stuff. It ended in a long court battle, piles of money spent on lawyers, and total alienation from his kids. They won't even see him now. He fell silent again, gathering his thoughts. I don't want that, Lena. We were together for 23 years. Not always perfect. I wasn't always a good husband, he admitted, and I could see how hard that was for him. But I don't want our story to end in war. I don't want to hate you. I don't want you to hate me. There was truth in his words. And that surprised me more than anything. The Victor I knew never admitted faults. Never compromised. What happened to him in these 2 days? All right, I said, making a decision. I agree to your terms. 3 million and the apartment stays with you. But on one condition. What is it? We do everything officially, through a notary. Of course, he nodded. I've already arranged it. Tomorrow at 10 a.m. if that works for you. I'll send you the address by text. We talked a bit more about the logistics. How to split the accounts, where to transfer the money, when I'd pick up the rest of my things. It was all businesslike, calm, emotionless. As if we weren't a husband and wife, but business partners wrapping up a joint project. What about your mom? I asked at the end. How did she take the news? Victor grimaced. As usual, first hysteria, then blame, then threats to cut me out of the will. This time I just didn't listen. We parted almost amicably. Victor even offered to drive me, but I declined. Natasha was waiting so we could go see the apartment together. When I left the cafe, I found a message from an unknown number. Sergei Pavlovich, attorney. I'll expect you tomorrow at 9 a.m. at my office for a consultation before signing the agreement with your husband. Address follows. Clearly, Natasha had given him my number. That's fine. An extra opinion from a professional doesn't hurt, especially when we're talking about 3 million rubles. The apartment in Sokolniki was just as I had imagined. Small, cozy, with minimal but essential furnishings and old, sturdy plumbing. Tiny kitchen, combined bathroom, a bedroom living room with a sofa and wardrobe. No luxury, but more than enough to start a new life. Do you like it? Natasha asked as we left the building. Very much, I replied sincerely. When can I move in? Tomorrow if you want, she smiled. I've got the keys. But first, meeting with the lawyer and Victor. What did he say? She asked. I told her everything. About our talk, the unexpected offer, Victor's sudden change. Suspicious. Natasha frowned. 3 million's good, but you need to check all the documents, all the terms. Good thing Sergei Pavlovich will be with you. He won't let you get tricked. You think Victor's planning something? I felt a twinge of anxiety. He seemed so sincere. I don't know, Natasha answered honestly. Maybe he really decided to end things peacefully. Or maybe it's a clever scheme. Either way, stay alert. I couldn't disagree. I'd lived with Victor too long to easily believe in his sudden transformation. But on the other hand, people do change under extreme circumstances. Maybe my leaving shook him enough to make him rethink everything. That evening, back at Natasha's, I unpacked my shoebox of manuscripts. Everything was there. The early stories, diaries, notes for the novel I never finished. As I reread them, I felt a strange sense of reunion, as if I had met an old friend I hadn't seen in years. Some passages felt naive. Others surprised me with their depth. But most importantly, I saw the real me in those texts. The one I used to be. The one I could become again. You know, I said to Natasha, setting the notebook aside. I think I'm starting to understand why everything happened now. Why I found the strength to leave at this exact moment. and not 5 or 10 years ago. And why's that? She asked, looking up from her laptop. Because I was finally ready, I said, surprised by my own calm. Because that soup thrown on me was just the final straw. The real reason was deeper. I finally understood. Either I save myself now or never. Natasha smiled and shut her laptop. You know what psychologists say? A woman doesn't leave her husband when things are bad. She leaves when she realizes it'll never get better. You realized that, Lena. And you made the right choice. We talked for a long time that evening, about the past, the future, our plans. I told Natasha about my long-held dream, to write a novel about women of our generation. Those who lived through the 90s, built families, raised children, and tried not to lose themselves. About those who, at 45, suddenly realize life is just beginning, and the most important things are still ahead. Then write, Natasha said simply. Right now. Don't wait for the perfect moment. It won't come. Write every day, even just a little. This is your chance, Lena. Don't miss it. I nodded, feeling the flame inside reigniting. The same fire that once made me spend nights scribbling thoughts, feelings, and stories into notebooks. Tomorrow would be a new day. A meeting with the lawyer. A meeting with Victor. Signing the papers. The beginning of my new, independent life. A life where I finally belonged to myself. And the soup that had been thrown at me in a fit of rage. Well, it really had become the last straw, the one that broke the dam of fear and doubt, releasing the river of change. If you like this story, click the like button and subscribe to the channel. That motivates us to create new, engaging stories every day. We apologize in advance for any pronunciation or stress errors. All the best and be happy.